What's up, gang? This is your boy Thomas Falilu with Roots in the City podcast, where real stories, real growth, and real nitty gritty happens here, man. So
Let's
I'm
go.
super excited to have my Toko here, Junior Salt, Coach Salt. And so, what's up, Toko?
Man, how's it going, man? Appreciate you for having me on.
Oh, man. So, real quick, before we begin, I sent you an icebreaker question here, real quick. That way, we can set the tone of how this podcast is going to go. But here's the icebreaker for you. What's something people think they know about Junior Salt that is completely wrong?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one right there. One thing. This might actually, I'm gonna kind of reverse that question a little bit, but it's something that I actually started getting into, dabbling in, not just a little bit, is something that'll probably catch a lot of people off guard. Is kind of getting into finances and real estate. That those two topics right there. Within like the last, I want to say the last 2 3 years have caught my attention and has sparked an interest. And so I'd say those are two things like within the last few years that have caught my eye, and I've looking more into it, trying to just educate myself. I know there's a lot of our Polynesian people who are currently excelling in it, but yeah, man, that's I want to say not too many people know that about me.
Ah, that's amazing, man. Obviously, everybody know that you've been coaching for quite some time now. But let's go to the beginning now. Togo. Let's go to the like to where it all started. So introduce yourself, introduce your family, your siblings, and where you come from.
Yup. So my full name is Vicesio Salt Jr. So I'm named after my dad. Shoot, I was born in California in the Bay Area in San Mateo. That's probably the only credit I'll ever give Cali. But but yeah, I mean, shoot, my parents moved to Utah when I was about the age of 7. And we've been here ever since. So anytime if somebody asks me where I'm from, I just say Utah, man, 801. To be specific,
801.
it's Glendale. Yeah, Glendale, Utah. So, for some of the audience, if you guys don't know where that's at, man, it's one of the best places, right in the middle, smack dab of Salt Lake City, man,
Oh,
right there. So,
nah, man,
um,
that's awesome.
yeah, but shoot, my parents are Moyata and Misisio. My mom is from Ha'apai, from Pangai, and then my Tonga, and then my dad's from Homa, Tonga Tapu. And so there's 8 siblings. I'm the oldest of 8. There's 6 boys, 2 girls, and yeah, man, we were for the most of us like this Utah's home, and so I think I could also speak the same for the rest of the siblings. Anytime somebody asks them where they from or what hood you claim, this it's always gonna be Utah. Yeah, it's always gonna be
So it's
Utah.
gonna be
So
Utah as a whole, man. So,
yes, sir.
man. By the way, man, Homa, man, Kaikuma, eh?
Oh well.
Um,
Oh no, I was saying like it's funny because I'm even to this day I don't even know what the true story is behind that Homa Kai Kuma. And for the viewers out there, Kai obviously in Tongan means eat, and then Kuma is rats. And so I'm
right,
at
right,
least
right.
the story that I was told, and I mean obviously there's a lot of little riddles and a lot of passed down you know stories from there, but apparently there was a big kava ceremony, and you can imagine the men and all the people that are currently sitting in the circle. Long story short, you had some noble or a king or something like that that was present at that night during that kava ceremony, and there happened to be a rat that ran across the room, and one of the gentlemen there apparently, because it's causing a lot of chaos. People are like turning their heads, looking. They're distracted by this
Right,
guma or
right.
this rat, only to for some gentleman to grab it and guess he just killed it right there. And that noble person ended up giving that Hingwa Fakatentene, or that that nickname to the to that to
Right.
that to that little village right there. So Homakai Kuma, that's nothing to be proud of. It sounds cool in Tongan, but then you're like, dang, eating rats? Yeah.
No, man, that story is a similar story that I've heard, when I was in Tonga. So, I mean, nice that you broke that down, man, so that the audience can, especially,
Mm,
kau Tonga ben na whanongo
yep.
be gi he podcast ko ni.
Uh,
So, real quick, um, back to your childhood and stuff like that. Was football a thing, or because I heard you dabbled in rugby as well.
Yes,
So
sir.
was football the main sport?
Yeah, football was the main sport. Football was the main sport. Just man, in Glendale, there's a ton of poly kids. Just like any other state that has like like I was in Texas, right? Yesterday, Euless, that community right there, ton of polys, ton of talent. You go to California, you have SoCal, NorCal. Well, yeah, in the state of Utah, I mean, specifically where I'm from in Glendale and Salt Lake City, there's a ton of Polynesians that were playing football. And, to be honest, I didn't really know, my parents didn't know, and so just kind of following the crowd really. And then from there, I eventually found, thought that it was something that it was an avenue for me to, kind of, that's kind of like where it took off right there. I was just following the crowd. All the
Right,
kids were
right,
playing sports. That was back in the days where everybody was outside. We used to have basketball courts at the park, and we'd go to the park and, just outdoor activities, right? Being outside, not like nowadays where everybody's just got video games and, stuck on their iPads like my kids, man. They just want to be in front of a TV screen. But yeah, it's just being around all the neighborhood kids, going to the park, playing outside football, little street ball, and that's kind of like where it really, really started. Yeah, that rugby thing, I just got lucky. It was just me just trying to stay busy. In terms of,
right, right.
once
Off
the football
season,
was
yeah.
done, yeah. So I did three sports in high school. I did football, and then right after football season, I think it transitioned into wrestling, and then right after wrestling, it went right into rugby. So I was busy, didn't have time to mess around and to
Wow,
go and get in
yeah.
trouble. Yeah,
Right. So let's talk about the high school because Brighton is kind of far away from Glendale.
yeah, oh yeah.
So I know you went to Brighton High School, and so let's talk about that because I know from Glendale they either went to East High School or West High School. What made you make that decision to go to Brighton? Was it family? Or was it what was it?
Yeah, I honestly didn't. I wouldn't say I did not didn't. I didn't entirely have that choice. It was my parents looking out for me. At the time, and that's
Right,
why I kind of giggle about Glendale because everybody knows that they look at Glendale as like a troubled little neighborhood or a troubled town. And, I mean, there's trouble there.
right.
There's trouble, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of kids. Unfortunately, a lot of guys my age group, were affiliated and got caught up in that
right,
gang activity life. And so for me, I think my parents kind of they definitely observed and saw that these were the kids that I was playing the street ball
yeah,
with, going to the parks with. And at the time, I was a little disappointed that my parents wanted to move me out. And they always talk about your environment. You surround yourself with whatever environment you're in, you're gonna become one of those kind of people. And not to
right.
ever throw any shade at my brothers or any of my generation. A lot of my boys that I grew up with in Glendale, not to throw any shade at those guys. My parents were just like, man, I promise you, you're gonna see it. It's gonna be a blessing once
It's gonna pay out.
you have to go
It's gonna
through
pay
this.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, my parents were shopping around for a school, and I didn't necessarily go to, it wasn't like how it is now, where guys, I feel like a lot of people are like, oh, what's the best high school? Let's transfer over there so I can get some looks or get some scholarships or whatever. Like for me, my parents like, I just need to
Right,
get you out of here, get you into a completely different environment with the Balangis, right? Because I know they're not gonna
right.
be, doing all this stuff, you know, getting in trouble and being a knucklehead on the streets. So I was commuting there, like I was taking the UTA bus for my first year, and then my last 2 years, my junior senior year, I was driving. But yeah, it's like you said, man, from Salt Lake, from Glendale to Brighton was that was easily about a 25, 30 minute commute every day. And
Right, right,
so, my parents were willing to make that sacrifice because they was just trying to really,
right.
look out for me as being the
Look
oldest
out
as
for you.
well. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like how that was story for Brighton.
I mean, yeah, that kind of fell right into the next question here was, your parents and what they installed into you, you know what I mean? Like and having that foresight, right? That foresight of like, man, I want to take our oldest child, not because the environment, but they kind of knew right away, man, if we can guide him into that position, I mean, the kids will fall in line, right? And so your experience at Brighton, man, how was that? Was that a good experience for you or did you love it?
Man, at first I didn't, what I mean, going over there, especially growing up with all, Polynesians, a lot of minorities,
Right.
you get there and it's like, man. I'm the one that's like I stick out like a sore thumb. And so I would say the transition was
Right,
pretty smooth because
right,
of sports. Because obviously with sports
right.
you have teammates, and teammates will make the transition for you, really easy. So man, like some of my best friends to this day are all those Palangis, man, all the Palangis from Brighton, man. Always looking out, and you know they understood my sacrifice, willing to travel out there for school and try to pursue a better life. They were all about that. So
Moving to the next question here, like as far as high school goes, I mean, we talked a little bit about rugby. Like, did you play for a club team or did you play for Brighton? Like, what was that?
yeah, so back in when I was still in high school, rugby was all club. It's
It
kind
was
of
all
cool to
club at
see
that
how,
time. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it was all club. So club is like for all the, right. You would have different neighborhoods that would collectively bring guys. Right, you would have like guys from East, West,
Right,
Highland, that they would combine. That's how it was back then. And so when I was playing at Highland, that's Highland High School, but it was a club team. So we had a whole bunch of kids from, like I said, from East, from West, from Highland, from Bountiful, that we all,
right.
that was back then with the club. But now it's kind of cool to see how it's evolved so much with having every high school, have their own rugby team. So that's kind of pretty cool.
Program. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I mean, like with the rugby, I obviously, man, that's going to transition to what I'm going to go into right now, right? Like I remember seeing you for the first time, and you just got in from the MTC, and you gave us this DVD.
Uh-oh,
You
man,
gave us this DVD, and
already
we're
spreading
watching
spreading
it. We're
false
watching,
rumors.
but you gave us this DVD, and I was like, dude, this guy's the star. Like, like right away, like we were all like, man, this guy's acting like his. So tell us a little bit about, because I don't think a lot of people know, but tell us your experience about your time in that film, Forever Strong, because that was a hit film, and I want people to, really acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge that, and your role in that.
Man, I don't know if it was a hit film, but nah, but it was not for us. It was such a cool opportunity though. So when I was on the team for Highland High School, right? So the movie's about Highland, the Highland rugby team, and I was
Right,
just fortunate enough to be on the team during that year where, during that year, Larry Gelwicks is the head coach. He's retired now, but when I was my senior year, it was like his 22nd year coaching, being the head coach. And mind you, Highland travels everywhere,
wow,
all around. They've been to Tonga, they've been to New Zealand, Australia, South Africa to go
right,
play a lot of these, outside teams. And I just happened to be on the team that year where they wanted to kind of document, all of his experiences and his success. So out of those
right,
22 years, out of his 22, Larry Gelwitz, his 22 years, I want to say at the time he won nationals about 17 or 18 times, and that was the reason
wow,
that they wanted to make a film, because they were like, man, this dude, whatever this guy is
right,
doing, like he's getting so much success,
it's
and
working,
we got to pick his brain, and we got to
right,
dive into what he's actually really doing, to get these guys not only
right.
successful on the field, but getting these guys opportunities to go play overseas.
And then, man, like, yeah, that film. So those who are tuning in and have not, had the opportunity to watch that film, go see my guy Junior Star in that film, man.
Hey,
Ah, amazing, man. He should be acting right now, man. I was like,
man,
oh, we should throw him a little Oscar event going on, man. But
I don't know
anyways,
about
man,
that
let's
one. I
move
don't know
on
about
to
that.
let's move on to, like the University of Utah. So during your high school career, were you being highly recruited at that time? Was there some schools that were interested in you?
During high school, not really. A couple Mountain West schools at the time. I remember like UNLV was reaching out. Like I has sparked an interest in both Utah and BYU. Like I've always attended, just because there were two home teams, I would attend their camps.
Right.
But that was about it, man. And so, after I wasn't one, I was okay in terms of my football skills in high school. I thought I was, decent enough to do, like, it was just a walk on, really. It was a walk on at one of these schools. And
Really?
so at the time, yeah, at the time, I was like all state my senior year, my junior and my senior year, but didn't really have no like legitimate like offers. Coaches were like, man, we think you
Right.
can be like a walk on. And so for me, it was just, shoot, yeah, I'm for sure gonna go serve a mission. You know what I mean? Get kind of, put the football thing in the back, in the back burner, and and then try to pursue the mission thing, and then from there come back and lock and load, in school. Not only that,
Right.
but school for me wasn't as I didn't do as good as I wanted to as well. So academically,
Mm,
I think that also kind of put me at a disadvantage. But it was after the mission when I came back, when I went to JUCO, when I went to JUCO out in California, Mount Sac. Shout out to all the Sac dogs in
Mount
Mount
Sac.
Sac. It was my first game, my very first game. I had BYU was my first offer, like legit offer. They were like, "Man, we just kind of been keeping
Wow.
tabs with you, and
Right.
so from right there, that's when I mean, like I felt, the other thing too is like I'm 2 years older than a lot of these, you know, returning high school kids, but anyways, yeah, I was fortunate enough to go, and I mean that my first year at Mount Sac, I started racking up a ton of offers, and then yeah, from there, just kind of took off in terms of like playing wise, my experience here at Utah. I was originally committed to University of Florida. I was originally committed to go there, after my trip there. Loved it.
Right.
I thought it was like one of the
Wow.
best. And I think I was getting a little ahead of myself, getting just, just over my head, really, just getting out to like a big
Right. Right.
SEC team and seeing the stadium, seeing they're sponsored by Jordan and all the type of gear they get, and it's big time football.
Right.
So
Right.
for me at the time, I'm glad there's a lot of every now and then my wife would ask me like, man, do you ever thought of like how things would have been had you gone to Florida? I was like, yeah, every now and then, but I don't regret,
Right.
making that decision. For me, my parents came out to all my games at Mount Sac. Even though they lived here in Utah, I was living out there in California. So my dad always, they made that trip. They drove up
They
every
make that
Saturday,
trip. Yeah.
whether it was a home game or away
Yeah.
game. And they
Wow.
came took care of me and my boys. So it was me and there were six of us in a small house that were all living together. It was a frat house right there at Mount Sac, but all Utah boys.
Wow.
And so that's kind of like where it took
Oh,
off,
that's
man.
what's
And,
up.
and the long story short, when Utah was already, I can't remember, they were like I don't know, during within like the same month that BYU offered me, they came knocking on my door and they offered. And shoot, long story short, man, I turned down all the other ones, and just that was my present to my parents, in terms of just being home and being
Right.
able to perform in front
Yeah.
of, like I said, Glendale, in front of Brighton, in front
Glendale.
of,
Right. Right. In. Right.
all,
Right
yeah,
at
yeah, in front of
home.
my parents. Yep.
Yeah.
So that was the reason why I chose
Yeah.
Utah.
So let's talk about, like, obviously the recruiting process, and you talked about the disadvantage of your academics. What is some advice that you would want to give these younger athletes now that you are in the position you are in right now, as far as the recruiting process and how that works? I mean, obviously there's a lot of kids that are really not paying attention to that, and they're wondering why, they're not getting any looks at. Can you give us some, insight on that?
Yes, sir. So I know this for a fact from position coaches, the guys who are actually doing the recruiting, and then like our recruiting department. Um, they specifically will tell you that they also look at academics and they'll grade you just as hard. Obviously, there's a lot of talent everywhere, all over the world, but if you're a guy who can't pay attention, a lot of because with class too, it also reveals like your character too. On the field, you might be a
That's
beast, but in the
correct.
classroom, you might have
Yeah.
lazy tendencies. You might be coming in late, or you might be sloughing all the time. You might have a really bad or poor relationship with the teacher. And so that's information that a lot of our coaches, especially I've seen it both at Utah and now that I'm in Michigan, they'll do the same too. Like, oh, what does his grades look like? What does his teacher say? Does he
Right.
actually know personally the academic advisor? And so it's like, I want to hear what their relationship is with. 'Cause while you might be a beast in front of your coach's eyes, but they
Wow.
also they also grade that part just as hard. They'll look at you from that side. And this is kind of being at Utah. Um, our players are graded on not only from a performance standpoint, like on the field. You have to go and
Right.
the NFL scouts when they come in, they're talking to the academic advisor, they're talking to the sports dietitian, they're talking to the our sports psych specialist, and they want to get like, and then they go to the athletic training room, right? That's another thing too. If you're a guy who's always hurt, but you never go and get checked out or you never go and get treatment, those are
Right.
things that's going to ding your credit score, right, or your NFL score,
Wow.
stock.
Right.
So, like I'm saying, like a lot of guys are always obviously we're focused on trying to get the scholarship, but what's actually probably affecting him as well is how their relationship or how they're doing academically, and then all the other entities or all the other departments that I just mentioned. So
And you just mentioned, yeah. No. That's great insight. Oh man, like I know there's a lot of guys that are, I get a lot of parents that are like, man, my son is so good. Like he's performing, he's doing all these things, and the first thing I asked him is, you know, how's his transcripts? Like what does that look like? What does his grades look like? Because college coaches, from my understanding, that's what they look at, and they also, you just mentioned they look at if they're slacking there, that tells them everything about their character, right? And so, we see a lot of our student athletes that are really great players. They end up at Snow College, which is fine, or they end up at Mount Sac. I mean, like yourself, I mean, really talented guys. But I'm glad you shared that because there's a lot of people that are wondering, like what type of information can I get? I get it. My head coach is giving me this information, but to hear it from a coaches that's actually there in the university, that's great insight, man. So appreciate that, though. So
Yes, sir.
as we move on, let's talk about your time. Now, you said, the real reason why you served a mission. Let's talk about that. You know what I mean? Like, let's talk about your mission and your journey on your mission. So, obviously, let's start from the beginning. So, when did you decide that you were going to serve a mission, and how was that?
Yeah, from a young age. I honestly can't remember if I had to put an age. I mean, I knew for sure when I was in high school that
All
like
right,
I was already knew I was gonna go serve. And so, when it came time for me to put the papers in, like there was no hesitation, there was no stalling or anything like that. I was like, all right, yeah, let me go ahead, fill it out, and shoot, they're about to call me to Tonga. I was telling my family, you can ask my family too. And so, long story short, when one of that, I think it was like a Wednesday or a Tuesday when you get your calling, I grabbed it
all
from the
right,
mail. My mom, there's a couple people that are still missing in my family that weren't there, and so I remember just jokingly, over to the side. My dad saw that I had the envelope and everything, and so I just pretended that I opened it. I said, "Oh, dang, Tonga," and my dad's like, "Really, don't?" I was like, "Nah, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding." So once my mom and all my siblings finally got there, finally
right.
opened it up, and I'm reading it, and then I see long words at the bottom, and in my mind, I'm like, "Man, I hopefully." Somewhere in like Africa or somewhere in like I thought from my peripherals it said something like Zimbabwe or something. Lo and behold, it said
Zimbabwe or something.
Nuku'alofa.
Yeah,
Yeah, Nuku'alofa Tonga. And then from there I just stopped reading, give it to my parents. I remember give them the giving them the call because they were in disbelief too because I've been joking around the whole time. I go outside and I just sprint down our street, just excited and heck yeah, I finally get to go to
right,
Tonga.
right,
Where my parents grew up and were born and raised, and at the time I'd never been to Tonga
right.
too, so that was my first time going to Tonga, and man, it was such a cool experience, man. One of the best experiences
Yeah.
I still hold to, that I say that I've gone through this day.
This day, yeah, man. I mean, I loved it too, man. So for your experience, like going through the MTC and then going to Dongo for the first time, how was that like? Actually coming out of the plane? Because man, my experience when I came out of the plane, it was hot,
Oh yeah.
and then not just that, going to the airport and seeing the smell, right? Like it was just different. So what was your experience like when you first got there? Like, how'd you take it all in?
Man, I'll tell you what, so I was in MTC right here in Provo. I was there for 2 months. And I
Right.
want to say within like the last like maybe 3 or 4 weeks, bro, like man, I was blowing up in terms of just like my waist size, my weight. Man, dude, I remember having a
MTC
to
food, man.
I remember
MTC
having to
food.
tell my mom and them, I'm like, I need to buy a bigger suit or bigger shirts because and then I remember my dad, right? He's like, dude, why you eating like that, man? You ain't over there
Right,
supposed to,
right.
you're supposed to control your eating, man. And I remember getting off, like you said too, right? I remember getting off because we were all wearing suits, just how hot and humid it
Right,
was. Man, I was sweating.
right,
I was like, man, I felt disgusted, just coming off, just being
right,
unphysically, like you know what I mean? Like it was just, I mean, I was so overweight and I remember just
right,
sweating constantly. And I'm like, man, I need some AC.
right,
Like it was a pretty rude awakening, man. I was not ready. I would say the first month I was ready.
right.
Second month, man, I was racking up them
You wasn't
plates in the
ready.
MTC. Yeah, I was getting a little too
Wow.
too caught up eating in the MTC, but only to lose like I mean I thought I mean I dropped a good amount of weight out there,
A
and
lot of
so
weight.
when I had to
Yeah.
put my suit back on coming home, like it was like, dang, who's actually in this suit? You know what I mean? Like
Who was that?
couldn't believe that it was my suit.
Right, right,
But
right.
yeah, that was my initial, if I can, my earliest memories of finally getting out there. That's what it was. I
Right.
remember just being so hot and humid, and I was just like, man, just feeling uncomfortable because of how big I was. And so,
I know.
man, good thing it was
Well,
majority walking out there, man.
oh yeah. I mean, or riding the bike and stuff like that. And so, let's talk about your first area, and let's set the tone and how that set the tone for you on your mission. Where'd you serve at in your first area?
Yup, my first era was Ewa, Ohonua. So Ewa. Yup. So when I first get to Tonga Tapu, we were there for a couple of days, and we
Right.
had zone conference, and I got word, hey, you're going to Ewa. And I'm like, I'm listening to, if I'm not mistaken, I remember the rest of the other guys, like Misi Makai was one of the guys that I went with,
Right.
and the other two individuals. So all three of those guys ended up just staying in Tonga Tapu, and I was the only
Right.
one
Right.
to get sent out, on the boat. So I remember it was had that boat ride, to Ewa was about a 2.5 boat ride. But man, anybody who knows that boat ride from Tonga Tapu to Ewa,
That's
man,
a rough,
it's like,
that's a rough ride.
hey, apparently
It's
that's
the
like, I don't know, it's like the top 5 deepest parts of the ocean in all of,
right.
and so yeah, as soon as you get to about midpoint between Tonga and Ewa, man, that boat, oh yeah, you be seeing all these
It's
roller
a small
coaster,
boat too, yeah.
oh yeah,
Oh, yeah. And I told Missy too, I was like, "Man," because he told me, because I met Missy before I met you when in Vavau, and so Missy was like, "Yeah, man, Junior went to go serve in AWA," and I was like, "His first area? That was my first area," you know what I mean? Like, on my
oh,
mission. And so, yeah, man, we had a connection there. So I always knew, I was like, dang, dude, like, for him to go there our first, because I was the first out of my group too to
mm,
go, and everybody else stayed in Tomatapu. So, but let's talk about some stories there, man. Some, things that you remember, things that you always cherish, like, and then some struggles that you had. So let's start with the good things first, and then we'll talk about the struggles after.
man, I think this story right here will kind of lead into it. I think one of the craziest experiences I had in Tonga was, so after Airwell, right? I get called to Niwa, right? So I was in Airwell for two
Yeah,
and a half months, right? So 2.5 months, and I get called to go to Airwell, right? So I heard back from President. Shout out to President Lynn McMurray, Makamaile. He
yeah,
calls, ends up hitting me up and saying, hey, we're gonna send you off to Niwa Toptapu.
you
So I
will.
ride that
Yep.
that 2 hour boat ride from Airwell back to Tonga Tapu, and then I was there for a little bit, only to catch the boat again from Tongatapu to Apai. Okay, that was in one
And then
day.
hot bites of
Another
Vavau.
day,
Yep.
Hapai to Vava'u, and then Vava'u to Niuafo'o to Niuatotapu. So
Ah,
for one whole week, whoa, oh man, dude, that was like they say in Tonga, man, pau get fishy see it get there, man. And I mean, it's
oh
like a
my
gut check, I
gosh.
mean, gut check. But
Yeah, yeah.
man, I took pride in being able to ride the boat, for a whole week. That's just
Right.
I know some of these guys, obviously the people in Tonga, they ride boats their whole lives, man. But being able
The
to
whole lives,
to
yeah.
do that, yeah, for a whole
Wow.
week, I took pride in that. It was definitely a difficult thing because you just in that boat, man, just rocking back and forth, seasick and everything like that. And everywhere we stop in Hot Buy. We had missionaries feed us there. We go to Babao, missionaries would feed us there. New
Missionaries
I
Fiji, yeah,
finally
yeah.
got to eat the olfato. That was a cool experience right there, right? I don't know what it's called
How
in
was that?
English. Man, that was so we had three different
Grub. I think it's called
yeah,
grub. I
it's
think it's
called
like
grub.
the little grub from yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, yeah, in Lion King like that, I literally, because in Samoa it's the same as ofako. And so it's the same thing. And I remember, people were talking about that, and I was like, "Nah, man, people are eating that as snacks." And so you had the opportunity to do that, man. So tell us a little bit about that.
yeah, it's definitely an acquiring taste, man. It ain't good by any means. Now, so what they had so one of the ladies in the village had whakapakure, or deep fried it.
Right, right.
So that
Friday.
was a little
Yep.
more tolerable. Yeah, so I was eating that and eating the
Yeah.
hopa, eating the meakai with it.
Right,
And
right.
so it didn't taste too bad, but then like I had to just attempt the living one, right? Like you said, your Lion King. Imagine like the worm, right? Just still alive.
Right,
And I
right.
just threw it in there, really just didn't try to taste it too much. And then I ate the banana, the
Right.
plantain with it, just try to wash it down.
Right,
So
right.
just like to say that I ate it. But
Wash
yeah,
it
that was
down, yeah.
a different experience right there too. And so I think one of my favorite memories in out of my whole mission this is probably gonna be a little contradicting to what we're supposed to be doing, right? And so I get out there to Newa, and long story short, I end up playing rugby out there, right? And so, man, I remember
Really?
the first month we were out there, me and my companion. Shout out to Supalasi Fia out of Hot Tejo. Uh,
Ah,
so me and him, and if
yeah,
for those of y'all that know Supalasi Fia, he was a captain of that Hot Tejo team,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Rugby. And so, man, for like literally almost one whole month, trying to knock on doors, and people just, people didn't want to listen to us. And the warden, Niwa
Right,
Tapu,
right,
dude, it was one family and a couple other people. So it was like in total, there was probably like 8 people. And we would just all gather at this one little small church. And yeah, man. So, we end up just walking around for a whole month after a whole month of giving up and not knowing what else, what other kind of ways to be creative to try to, find
right,
people to
right.
teach or, have people bring, invite us into their homes. Man, we would always walk past this field, and there's a lot of boys out there playing rugby, male male, they're playing touch. And I
Right,
was
right,
like,
right.
man,
Yep.
I kind of hinted to my companion. He was a senior companion, right?
Fifia.
And so I'm just like I
Right,
said,
right,
this is my
right.
second area. This is my second area. And he's like, this is his last couple transfers before he goes home. And long story short,
Before he was, yeah, yeah.
we end up going and playing touch with these guys. We built a pretty cool relationship, a cool bond. And these guys started inviting us to go to Utah. We go to Utah to the bush, Taki Manyoke or
That's
whatever with those
awesome.
guys,
Yeah.
and then from there we started
Right,
inviting them to
right,
church. We started inviting them. They would come and they would invite us to come over to their house to share the gospel or to feed
right,
us for most of the part. Right, it's just feeding us, and then from there it actually transitioned to I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys, at least the people who are watching, has watched the other side of heaven. And man, them people, Elder Groberg at the time, didn't he had a pretty rough experience in the beginning, but towards the end when he leaves there,
right.
man, just that if I could try to paint that picture, that's kind of like the celebration, or when our departure, man, it was so I felt so close to those people, and just to that entire village, man. They took us in
Yeah.
and they treated us no differently, like we were one of their kids, and so they opened their homes. And
Right.
I from what I've heard when I was there, it only set the other rest of the missionaries who did end up going to Niwa Tapu. People come back to them like, man, I heard Elder Masima was playing rugby out there in Niwa, but oh man. But then I'm like, but tell the rest of the story though, and they would say, oh man,
Tell
yeah,
the rest
those
of the story,
families,
though. Like
yeah,
it,
those
tell
families
it
were
how it
so
was.
loving, man, and
Right.
and I think
Yeah.
that's for anybody who's serving a mission or anybody who's preparing to serve a mission, I would say you got to think of creative ways, right? Try to think outside the box, right? The traditional
Serve.
knocking on
Yeah.
a door,
Yeah.
yeah, well, that might work, but the other thing that comes in mind is the story of the talents, right? Being able to utilize those talents, and I felt like
Right.
we were decent enough at rugby to to go in there. That was like an icebreaker for us, right?